This is the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane and Olgun back with you as we are every single Tuesday morning. And timing is everything. And unfortunately, with this crazy schedule we've seen over the Christmas period, there hasn't been a perfect time to actually run a podcast, Old. But we've got a day off, and it does lead us into one of the biggest doubleheaders you could imagine at this stage of the season. Wednesday night, you got the four teams between second and fifth that are playing off against each other on Wednesday night. So we thought this was a good time to try and decompress after the weekend, and plenty of fascinating stories again.
Yeah, so we're recording this on a Tuesday. This is like the day off, but it's not the end of the round. Now, I don't actually care about rounds. Like that doesn't affect the way either of us do our jobs, right? If anything, the end of the round is just like a stopgap for us to do content. But it does feel weird because this doubleheader on Wednesday is the last day of the round, even though we have a day off in the middle of the round. Am I right in saying this?
You are right in saying this. This is round whatever it is. And I agree, when you are playing 2, sometimes 3 games a week now, you're playing Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, Wednesday nights. It doesn't bloody matter. Just scrap the rounds next year. Every team plays 29 games, 28 games, whatever they make it, 35 next year. Who knows? The rounds don't matter. Nobody cares about it. We all just look at the standings either way and how many games these teams have played. But you've got the Phoenix and Sydney, the Phoenix red hot, the Sydney Kings still constantly, as we have all season, trying to figure them out. And then Perth Wildcats, Melbourne United. It's in Perth. This is a venue that Melbourne United does not mind playing at. This is going to be a game that is must watch. And we need to talk about the Perth Wildcats. We've been threatening to do this for a little while now, and we're going to give kudos to this team. We want to talk about the Phoenix as well. No Derek Walton, but they just handled their business, which is what we had to do. I suggested last week 15 wins was the marks for safety when it came to the play-in. The Phoenix are already nearly at that mark, so they're looking in great shape. We're going to break down some of the things we're doing. Hey, before we get to the Wildcats, just quickly, I had the Brisbane Bullets. I also had, obviously, Adelaide, Tasmania, and Phoenix, and there's 4 teams chasing that 15-win mark. This is really unfortunate, Olds. You know, last year I was on the ride with the people of Tasmania. We loved the Jack Jumpers, but I am at the point with just the devastating injuries that this Jack Jumpers team has had. I'm like, come on, man, let's just get Adelaide in there. I'm sorry, Jack Jumpers fans, but we want to watch the best basketball, and this team is just decimated right now, and it's sad to watch.
And it doesn't feel like if the Jack Jumpers make the play-in and the playoffs, it doesn't feel like that they'd get either Sean McDonald or Will Magnay back for any of that. Scott Roth was super pessimistic about that. They could get Mujuk Deng back, but I don't know if that's enough for them to actually compete at that level. It's very unfortunate because like we're focusing on the 3 teams that are kind of fighting for the 6th. I see that Phoenix is a team that's already in that 5th spot and potentially higher. But you look at the Brisbane Bullets, Tasmania Jack Jumpers, it's just to a point where they're so broken physically from a health standpoint that it's just, I don't know if they can even compete to make the 6th. I don't know if they can pick up those sneaky wins here or there to get to 13 or 14 wins or whatever they're going to need. So Adelaide has the advantage of obviously being talented and playing good basketball right now, but they're healthy. That's the key to all of this. Who is the top team in the league right now? It's the Illawarra Hawks. Yes, I think they're probably the most talented team across the board as far as their top-end talent and their depth. They've also been healthy the entire season. They're the team that's had the most consistent starting lineup over the course of the season. Who was that last season? It was Tasmania. So health matters, and I think health will matter going into this. And I do feel bad, and I feel bad for the administrators and the coaching staff who have this idea, this vision of a team going into a season, and then they get to their back stretch of their last 7 or 8 games. And if you're Brisbane, you don't have Tyrell Harrison, your hub for so much of it. If you're the Jack Jumpers, you don't have your defensive anchor for a significant portion of the season. You don't have your starting point guard for the majority of the season. It's very, very unfortunate, but we have to be cutthroat and say we probably want the teams that are healthy and performing at the level right now, and that's probably the Adelaide 36ers. I think the schedule probably benefits them too. I think they make the 6th. But yeah, with respect, I feel like the teams that are broken, it'd be good if they just fell to the wayside a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mentioned it in New Zealand. Obviously, the team that's playing better, but I mentioned last week at these 6 games that Tassie had, if they wanted to go 3-3 to get to 15, maybe you get there with 14, but they're starting to have some hefty losses as well, which is not helping their cause. But they lost to New Zealand. They do have Cairns on the road home, but they've got Illawarra, Melbourne, and the red hot Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, so it's just looking really tough. I think you're probably going to win 3 of those last 4 games. I don't see it. And as we pointed to, Brisbane in the same boat. They didn't quite get up there. It's hard to picture a team winning 8 games in a row in the regular season and then not making the top 6 in the 10-team league. But, I don't feel too bad for the Jack Jumpers. I mean, the health stuff sucks, but they won the title last year. I think they're all going to be fine. I tell you who doesn't want the Adelaide 36ers in there, though. That's the other teams. Everyone I speak to from other teams, they're just quietly saying, gee, we would like it if Adelaide wasn't there because we understand how dangerous they are. We'll talk about Adelaide a little bit later on in the show, but it does look like they are going to be the team that's going to be able to sneak in the top 6 there, perhaps to the disappointment of the teams they might be playing, even if they don't want to admit it. Let's talk about the Perth Wildcats, though. This is a team that has been flying for a while now, and we just haven't quite dove into them as much as we probably should have. So they're 15-9 on the season. They've won 7 out of their last 8 games. And you tell me what you're seeing, but I thought this was a fascinating game against Adelaide, and we've seen now an extended sample size of John Rillie making some changes to this lineup, and I think it's changed the way the team plays. Bryce is outstanding, we know that, but I think you've got to give some credit to John Rillie and what he's been able to do over the last 2 months, really since the start of December when Bryce Cotton came back into this lineup.
Yeah, and we'll preface it by saying that the schedule has not been amazingly difficult over that stretch. It's been a road schedule, so absolutely give them credit for that, but it hasn't been against all the elite teams. They did play the Illawarra Hawks. They lost here in Illawarra.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in at that, though, because I
please.
And only because I do see a little bit of this, and I saw when Tassie was winning all those games, and I was like, let's just wait and see what happens. But then they would win some games. It's like, that team's not playing very well. That team's not playing very well. We can't all constantly talk about how even the league is and then discredit teams for beating teams that are in front of them. Like, I understand sometimes there's some injury luck, but if you win 7 out of 8 games, chances are you're playing pretty good basketball.
You are. But there are also tiers. There are also levels to these teams as well.
Because who's the tier? Because if they're second in the ladder, who's the tier? There's Illawarra, we understand that.
There's a difference between the top 5 teams in the league and the bottom 5 teams. I feel like we're in agreement on this. Like and Adelaide can be one of those teams that's hovering in the middle because of how mercurial they are, because they can look like one of the 5 and they could look like one of the bottom 5, right? But I think there's a difference between those teams, and I think a lot of these wins came against those bottom 5 teams. Again, give them credit for winning the games. I did the same with Tasmania. I wasn't gonna treat them like an absolute contender because they won 8 straight games because of the nature of their schedule, because of the nature of the teams they play. But you absolutely have to give them credit for it, which I would do. And I think it's also the nature of the way they're playing. Right? I think they got way better defensively. I think Dylan Windler found his spots better defensively. I actually thought he was kind of bad defensively to start the season. I don't know what it was. I watched this guy get blown by a lot of back cuts, and now I think he's really stepped up. He's getting a ton of stocks throughout games, which isn't a true indicator of defense, but I think he's doing a lot of little things defensively to keep them going. Christian Doolittle coming back into the lineup is absolutely helpful. That's given an opportunity for someone like David Aquera to step into the starting lineup and find his footing a little bit, which he had it during his start with the Perth Wildcats to start his career with that team. And then it's just it's like trickling output from a bunch of guys. It's Ben Henschel having his moments. It's Elijah Pepper slowly finding his shot as well. Almanza, again, slowly finding his footing. So Bryce has been the consistent. He's been the guy that's sort of guided them throughout, obviously. But I think everyone has sort of come to the party behind him. And I think winning helps. I think winning raises the confidence, especially of a team that has a lot of young pieces around it. Like, you have Keanu Pinder, who's coming off the bench. I think he's doing a better job of putting consistent performances together. I think coming off the bench is also helping him. I think he can be a spark. But there's a lot of young guys on this team, and I think the winning is helping. And I think just having like a hub in Bryce is just like, it takes a lot off the shoulders. I think it takes a burden off, and it allows you to sort of be a little bit more free, because you know that Bryce is there to take care of you.
So we've had multiple conversations on Pinder right throughout this season, and it's interesting because a couple of weeks ago when we discussed Perth, I've been on it all season. I still think they need the best of him if they want to win a title. Like, we're talking about a title. We're not talking about finishing second, third, or fourth. We're talking about going all the way. And this team now 15-9. You have to consider them a chance to go all the way. And I just thought it was fascinating that you put David Aquera in the starting lineup. You've got Almanza there in the starting lineup. And how does that 4 or 5 hold up against the best teams in the league? But it's now been 8 games since they did that. And they've won 7 of those games. But what I'd also noticed, and this game against Adelaide was a perfect encapsulation of this, you always see your players and coaches like, oh, we don't really care about who starts. This is kind of part of it because I think that there is something to be said to put in two athletes and guys that will get up and down the floor, will crash the offensive rebounds a little bit, can scramble on defense, can provide a little bit of rim protection as well. I think there's something to be said about putting athletes around Bryce and saying, well, we know that Bryce is going to cook. Let's put guys around him that are going to hustle. Pinder, not necessarily always known for that. He's a guy that does a lot of his work on the offensive side, and he could dominate games. So I think it also helps the team because Bryce is only playing 32 minutes this year. That is well down on where he's been. Now, I know he missed basically a whole game, and that hurt his average a little bit, but it's only one game. So his minutes are down. And I think it allows you then to play Pinder a little bit without Bryce, feature him a little bit on offense, and then ultimately when you get down the stretch, we saw really in this game against Adelaide, which was close, he went back to Pinder. He had Wagstaff out there, and he had Doolittle with Bryce Cotton and Ben Henschel. So all of a sudden, he went back to his veterans down the stretch in games. But I think it's been a nice way to spark this defense, get some energy, get everyone involved, mix up the rotation a little bit with Bryce and Pinder, because maybe Pinder can get a little bit lost when Bryce is dominating the offense as he should be. So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. The last few weeks, I've been thinking about it more, and it's working. And I think you have to give it a big tick.
Yeah, the defense, I think, has been the story over this stretch. It's gotten better. It's to start the season, there were major concerns about how this team could guard consistently. A couple things.
Well, there has been for years as well. Let's talk about that. This is probably the best stretch of defense the Wildcats have played in years.
Best stretch of defense and best stretch of rebounding. And I think there's an obvious corollary with having Dylan Windler on the floor consistently. And I think it's always having two big bodies on the floor as well. So their defensive rebounding is getting better. Offensively, it's really interesting. I think we're seeing Bryce play a lot more point guard than he has in the past. Like, it's a lot of the ball in his hands. And I think it's because you can just put shooting around him, and they're doing that better. Ty Webster is not in the lineup right now. He's still out with that injury. And so you have Ben Henschel, who is an elite shooter. You have Dylan Windler, who is an elite shooter. So you have these shooters around Bryce, finally. And I think he's playing with the ball in his hands a lot. I think a lot of what they do is just happening like in the middle third of the floor with the bigs just distributing to Bryce, him cutting and coming off those handoffs and things like that. And the floor is so spread that their offense is so efficient. So I think that's helpful. And then the key, especially last game, and this is the thing that I think can lift their championship ceiling. I think their floor is really high. I think the nature of having Bryce just means that the floor of your team is high. But what Christian Doolittle did in that game, especially offensively, having another hub, having another person that you could throw the ball to, especially when he's down on the low block or he catches it in that mid-post area. He is just like a physical point of difference in the NBL that there were times when there was a big on him and he has the speed to get past them. And then down the stretch, DJ Vasiljevic was on him. And that's barbecue chicken. That's a layup for Christian Doolittle. So the fact that they have another sort of offensive hub outside of Bryce is so helpful, because I think Dylan Windler is slowly getting there where he can do some creation on his own, but he's largely a spot-up guy. Christian Doolittle, I think, is the key to lifting the ceiling of this team, to making them that title contender, because not only does he lift their defense to a level which could be playoff ready, but offensively, having another hub, if Keanu Pinder is going to be inconsistent, Doolittle being that guy is so helpful.
Yeah, and it's probably not surprising that he had that big offensive game against Adelaide. We discussed last week that there are some guys you can attack defensively if you're looking to play bully ball and get to the basket. Doolittle was great. I also thought he by far. Now I'm not saying he did. I'm not saying he stopped Kendrick Davis, because he was outstanding again and a dominant offensive player in the game. But I thought
he did a good job on him in the second half.
I thought Doolittle did the best job out of anyone on the floor. He came off the bench in that game. Windler gets the scratch in the eye, and it's been a weird season for Windler. I know you praised some of the defensive stuff, but I expected more, and I do think that he's still a wild card for this team offensively, because Bryce is going to do all the stuff he's going to do, and Pinder, as we said, he's a bit of a wild card as well. Is he going to show up? Is he not going to show up offensively and dominate games? He can. So I think with having multiple guys that can do that are big, because we've also seen when Bryce was out, Henschel had the game that he went crazy. But in this game against Adelaide, he had some massive moments. He had a righty drive cut to the basket, then he had a lefty drive cut to the basket finish. He had the step back three. So when the game was on the line, Henschel was like, yeah, give me the ball. I don't care. I'm happy to score. So they have got a lot of weapons. And the defensive stuff and the versatility. If Windler's there, maybe he's in that closing lineup instead of Wagstaff with Henschel, Doolittle, Pinder, Cotton. That's a damn good five to close with, particularly if a lot of those guys are fresh. Pinder's playing mid-20s minutes, low 20s minutes as well. So they've got a rotation where in the past you would look at it and say, man, Bryce is playing 39 and a half minutes just to keep this team alive. It hasn't been the case since he's come back from this injury.
And I agree with you. I expected way more from Dylan Windler, and I thought his first half of the season was like largely not amazing. But I feel like the second half of his season has been way better. Not only is he shooting the ball better, but I think he's guarding better. I think he's figuring out how to operate in this environment so much better than he did to start. I still don't think he's at the level that they probably want him to be. Like they want him to be, one of their, like they want him to be him. Like they want him to be one of their guys. And I think right now he's still pretty complimentary, but I think he's taking steps to getting there. I agree about Ben Henschel. Some of the plays he made toward the end of the game, and we can talk about Adelaide's defense if we want. And, their assistance in playing Jarrell Martin when, Isaac Humphrey was sitting there on the bench. I think whatever you get in spacing offensively, you lose tenfold defensively because Montrezl Harrell is not an effective defender in the NBL. Jarrell Martin is not an effective defender. And if your point of attack, Kendrick Davis and Dejan Vasiljevic, these are just two smaller guards. So unless you have Sunday Dech out there, like there aren't many plus defenders on the Adelaide team. And so credit to Ben Henschel, a young point guard, for seeing that, recognizing it, making sure to come off on balls, and just getting his head on the rim because there was no resistance at the point of attack and at the rim. And I wonder if do you think this season will come down to the last game between those two teams, another Adelaide at Perth game? Do you think it'll come down to that? Or do you think Adelaide could clinch a playing spot before then?
At this point, I would think that Adelaide probably clinch it before then. So they've played Perth and Cairns. They lost to Perth. Yeah, we said it before, that loss against Tassie where they just had no right to lose that game. And credit to Tassie.
If that's the difference, difference in the season, if Tassie steals one of those 3 games, that there are 3 games they should lose, and then they have a Cairns game. If they get to 14 wins, man, that game against Tassie that Adelaide lost, that might be the one.
It might be, but again, like last week I was looking at it with the schedule and we still had 6 or 7 games and I'm saying 15 wins is the absolute safe zone. It might end up being 13 now because I just don't know if Tassie's going to get there. Like I don't know what one of those games they're going to win outside of, maybe the Cairns one at the end. Now, this is the NBL, so they can come out and upset South East Melbourne next game and it's like, okay, we're back on here. So for the most part, it's in Adelaide's hands. They are as unpredictable as anyone, but they have got New Zealand. They've got Brisbane.
Both of those at home. Those are must wins in my mind.
They are, but they should take care of business, man. I know they've had all sorts of stuff going on, and he beat the top team, and then the fallout after that. But I just think Adelaide's getting in there. But if it does come down to that last game against Brisbane and Perth, Adelaide and Perth, I also kind of trust Adelaide because we've seen multiple times this year when they really set their mind to something defensively and as a team, they can be really good. It's just what happens in between those games. We got no idea. But Perth 15-9, as I said, credit to them. They're a team, particularly what they've done defensively. I've just criticized for years, as rightly so, as we all should have. We've loved what Bryce is doing, but he's got a whole bunch of guys that are coming together well. And again, credit to John Rillie because it has been a fun team to watch. And I loved that game against Adelaide. It was high scoring, but I didn't think it meant there was no defense. I thought there was some good stuff in that game, and overall it was pretty damn entertaining. Should we talk about the Phoenix? Because this is a Phoenix team that really at the moment, and again, you can point to and say, wow, you beat New Zealand, that they're just taking care of business. And speaking of coaching, we discussed the idea a few weeks ago, Josh King coming in. He's got this team organized. He's got this team playing defense. He's got the offense playing unselfish. And I know they let go of the rope a little bit against the Breakers once they got up big, but I'm just not too concerned about that. That happens in games. But the way they played in the first quarter and a half to a half in a game that is must win for them, it was dominant and it was impressive. And it was more than one guy. There were 6 or 7 guys that were contributing. And I love everything about the way he set up that game.
Yeah, like I really like the pace in which they play. Like they try to push the ball. They pick up full court. All that stuff is very cool. Um, something that I thought about. I watch the games. I look at the numbers, and Geordie Hunter's production is just way down. Then I was speaking to another player, and he was like, "Don't underestimate the impact of Geordie Hunter. Just the put aside like the rim protection and just the general anchoring of a defense, but the rim running, the rolling, the screen setting, all that stuff is so helpful for this team because all of their guards are going off right now. Like even games where Matt Hurt is relatively quiet by his standards. I think Nathan Sobey deserves a ton of credit because he started the season at a level where I was thinking, is this guy like a 15 minutes per game guy? Like, are they obviously just going to decline the mutual option at the end of this season? Now it's like he's playing really efficiently. I think he's playing within himself. Obviously, he has to step up a little bit more than now that Derek Walton Jr. is out, but I think they're getting enough creation from someone like Angus Glover, from Owen Foxwell, and I also think having like a sort of a no-leave shooter in Joe Wieskamp is so helpful for this team. I think they have so many like offensive hubs, and that's on top of how much they've improved defensively. Like they're a very dangerous team right now. I still have some concerns on when it gets down to the wire. How much will not having Derek Walton Jr. hurt them? Like, is that the thing that's gonna keep them from winning a game three in a semifinal or getting or advancing super deep in the playoffs? Like, is that the thing? Maybe, but right now I think their floor is so high and they're just getting a ton of production, a ton of impact from like 1 through like 9 or 10. And I think that's very impressive and give Josh King a ton of credit. Probably coming into this team, probably not knowing most of these players and being able to extract a ton of talent from all of them.
Well, that's the funny thing about it because that's the thing that we don't look at. You say, okay, you're going to come in mid-season. He's got no choice over the lineup he's got. So when he comes to Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, he's like, well, okay, I've got one big man. So what am I going to do? How am I going to work this in this league? And I thought what he did against New Zealand was, and it's only little things, and maybe he doesn't think about this as much as what I noted at watching the game. But it's like, okay, Taco Fall's going to come into the starting lineup. Well, why do you think Taco Fall came into the starting lineup? Because New Zealand probably thought to themselves, well, we'll get Hunter 2 quick fouls, and then we'll be able to dominate this game and stand at the free throw line. So what did Josh King and the Phoenix do in the first possession of the game? They draw up a play, they get Geordie Hunter a 3-point shot. So immediately, if you're New Zealand, you're sitting back and going, well, damn, we thought that we had a non-shooter playing the 5 and Taco can just sit in the paint and dominate this game defensively. He couldn't because in the first possession, that was signaling the intent that if you're just going to sit there, we're happy for this guy to shoot threes. On the next possession or a couple of possessions after that, Hunter, very smart, gets in a wrestling match. That's one foul there. A few possessions after that, he got the launch of a lifetime and nearly threw down the dunk of the century in the NBL, 2 fouls. And all of a sudden, New Zealand thinks they got an advantage, and instead, Taco falls on the bench with 2 fouls. So it's just a little thing, but I was like, man, he's on top of it. And I don't know whether he said that was the directive, do this for that reason, but it was very smart. It made a lot of sense to me, and it was taking advantage of what the opposition thought they had an advantage, and they didn't. It proved to be a mismatch because then even in the Phoenix, when they played small, they're like, yeah, we don't care. Matt Hurt can be on Taco Fall. Do your usual stuff. Just he can stick his hand up under the basket because the little guys actually harass Taco Fall sometimes more than the bigs because they can rip the ball, they can scrap the ball away from him, and then they're small enough and nimble enough, and this team's playing defense to scramble and get out to the shooter and contest the shot as well. So I just like it. He's found ways, even though what might be seen as a weakness in the roster with the lack of bigs, to make it work for him. It's cool.
Yeah, like Josh King deserves a ton of credit. Like he's the high level coach who came into the NBL. But his schemes, I think, are on point. I think the guys he's empowering seems to be working. Like Malik Lewis is someone who he empowered from the very beginning, starting him, making him like the guy, the point of attack defender. And I think that's paid dividends. I do think it matters when they press teams up the floor and a team gets over the halfway line and they're getting into their offense with 11 seconds left. I think all of that, it's all the little stuff, and it's not on a stat sheet, that it matters. It helps guide the pace of the game. It helps the Phoenix control the game, and it's helping them. It helps them run a little bit too. You have Sobey, you have Foxwell, you have these guys who can push the pace a little bit. So I think they're really interesting. Like they were a team that when Mike Kelly was fired, they were the worst defense in the league. they really quickly rose to become a top 3 defense, and they've just stayed there the entire season. Yeah, they've had some lapses here and there. I think of some fourth quarter lapses against the Sydney Kings. When they're faced with that sort of size and length, and the switchability of that team, what do they do? Where do they go? But overall, I think they're like everything they do is on point on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, it is really enjoyable. And perhaps the easiest thing to just notice when you're watching the game, and I said it at the start of the season, by the way, I've said this multiple times, this is the team that I was by far the most incorrect about, and now 5 games into the season, that looks great. Now, not so much, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the turnaround like I did with Illawarra last year. But the easiest thing, and I said at the start of the year, are we just expecting too much from Sobey? I know he's been a star in this league and a primetime scorer, but we can't pin this team losing on him. But what I will say is, if you've watched Nathan Sobey for a long time, you're seeing him do things that he just hasn't done in the past. And this is, again, another sign that this team is really enjoying the locker room. They're enjoying playing with their teammates. They're enjoying seeing their teammates' success. And there was a play late in this game. Sobey has a wide open straightaway 3, wide open. And he could have just let it fly. He would have let it fly 99 times out of 100 the rest of his career. But he gets the defender in the air, pump fake, passes the ball to Matt Hurt. He knocks it down. It's just good basketball. This team is making the right plays, and they're getting the ball to the right guys, no matter who it is. If they're in a better position, they're finding the ball. That has not been the case in the past. And you speak about teams that deserve a little bit of luck. I know Derek Walton's out right now, and what does that mean for their title contention? I don't know. But I do want to see this team play a couple of postseason games, because the old injury curse has hurt these fans for basically since they've been in existence. And they got a cool fan base, man. That was a fun crowd at the State Basketball Center.
And one last thing on Sobey. Yeah, he's someone, again, who was maligned to start the season, and I think rightly so. Like, I think the nature of the way he played was just not... You weren't going to win games with the way he played like that. And then, this is a pure eye test thing, but feels like he's shooting less pull-up threes, less contested middies. It seems like all the threes he's shooting off the catch, they're spot-up shots. And from when I spoke to people around the team, and you give Josh King a lot of credit for helping to rein in the talent there and to guide in the right direction. A lot of people gave Sam McKinnon credit when I spoke to some guys around that team. They said Sam McKinnon was the first one to sort of pull Sobey aside, rein him in a little bit, and sort of point him in the right direction. And then I think Josh King has sort of done that tenfold from then on. So they've done a good job of looking at this guy, saying, cool, there is like you got an athletic guard here. There's obvious talent there, but how do we make this efficient? And I think they've done a really good job at that. I think that's a really big part of this team's success going forward. And the fact that Derek Walton Jr. has been out, and they've still been able to... I think Sobey will still be able to stay in that sort of efficient lane, when you wouldn't even blame him for sort of trying to take on the entire load of the usage of this team. I think you give the coaching staff a lot of credit. You give Sobey a lot of credit for turning his game around.
Sam McKinnon, it's a good point you make. Hat tip to him, and he was good last year, or when he's done the interim job in the past, I should say. And if you're a team out there needing a coach down the line, I think there's enough evidence to suggest that he's obviously got the basketball IQ. We know that from so long in the game, but it seems like a guy that's highly respected by the players as well, and obviously still seeing him on the bench and interacting with the players and being a big part of this is really cool, because I don't know how desperately he wanted the job or whatever the case may be, but there would be situations where guys are like, I don't want to sit around with this, but he clearly likes the guys and they like him.
Sam McKinnon desperately wants a head coaching job in the NBA.
Yeah.
Doesn't make that very clear. Do I think he's next in line? No. But do I think there are teams that see him as like a high-level assistant? I think teams see that. I don't know how many teams see him as like a head coaching candidate.
Maybe they should reconsider that. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. I'm just basing it on
that's not my opinion. That's just like the feel from around the league.
Yeah. I'm in the camp of Sam McKinnon. But the Phoenix, as we said, playing great basketball, fun to see. By the way, just one last little note on this game. It was probably, I don't really know why the commentators weren't at the arena. It's only 20 minutes down the road. But anyway, probably lucky that the commentators were in the hub, because our man Liam Santa Maria, I think he would have ran on the court and given his next start, Kareem Lopez, a big hug halfway through this game, because he was getting very, very excited with what Lopez was doing on the floor. He was awesome, man. I know it hasn't been a great year for New Zealand, not a lot of highlights, but Lopez continues to get better and better. And I say just give him the ball the rest of the season. Let's see what this guy's got.
I agree. I'm in Wollongong right now. I was at Illawarra Hawks game last night, and I talked with a scout, and there was an NBA scout in the building. I talked with him after the game, and we sort of sat back, and he leant over. He was just like, "Every NBA team's going to come to Australia next season to see Kareem. And they will come multiple times." And I said, "Okay." And I was like, I don't know what he is at the next level. Is he purely complementary? Is there going to be another element of his game that he's going to unlock going into next season? But he said, I don't know, but every NBA team will send multiple people multiple times to come see this guy. I'm like, all right, awesome. Can't wait.
Well, what I'll say is, you think about guys in the past that have been out here, and they've gone high draft picks, but have they necessarily shown what he has shown in flashes? And now this is in his first year. He gets the benefit of having a second year, another offseason, completely understanding what he's walking his way into if he's back. We all hope that he will be. But in that one game, he's got one-handed dunks. There's a whistle when he throws down a windmill after that. He's got a little floater that he's throwing in. He's shooting a crap ball from the outside. Oh, he's an athlete. We perhaps haven't necessarily seen it, and it makes sense. There's not too many 17-year-olds like Luka Doncic, maybe. You're not going to take over games as a teenager at this age in a league like this. But the longer the season goes, we're starting to see star power, which we didn't see at the start of the year, and that's fine. But he is showing stuff at least that gives you the idea that he could take over games next year, no problem.
Yeah, it's not just the talent. The talent, there's talent there, and there is like a physical presence there and an athleticism. But it's the audacity. Like that's the cool thing. The fact that he's 17 and he is completely fine being physical against these 10, 15-year pros in the NBL. Like he is not he's not scared one bit. Nothing is daunting to him. Like he's very fine getting in the mud with these sorts of guys, and I think that's so impressive. Again, he's still 17. The fact that he has the audacity to do that, to use his physicality against this level of competition, very, very impressive.
Indeed. So were the Illawarra Hawks. And maybe they had a little bit of slippage a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, they lose to Adelaide, who they have had problems with. They lose the game to Cairns in crazy circumstances. The Sydney game, they win, but they let go of the rope in the fourth quarter there and probably tried to run the clock down a little bit. And we've discussed the idea. You know me. I like it. If teams are really good, but they suffer a few losses in weird ways, it's like, okay, I like it because you sharpen up and you get ready for the run to the postseason. Now, we've got a little bit hairy at the top of the standings, and they're not locked into the first spot, but they have 17 wins, obviously, Perth with 15. So this win over Melbourne was significant. But let me ask you the question and frame it this way. Were you more impressed with Illawarra or concerned with the ease with which Melbourne was dispatched?
I was impressed with Illawarra. There are some concerns with Melbourne. I think like Ian Clark, I think is a concern. I think their shoddy defense over this 4, 5, 6 week stretch is concerning. But Illawarra's ability to go against a veteran seasoned team like Melbourne and completely control the pace of that game, get what they needed out of their 2 stars in Trey Kell and Tyler Harvey, sprinkle in the talent of Sam Froling as well. And then it was an example of their depth versus everyone else's depth. And I think it was really on show. And it's everyone from Davo Hickey to Lockie Olbrick to Hyungjung Lee to Mason Peatling to Darius Days, who is getting an MRI today. He injured his hamstring against Brisbane on, I don't know what that is, on Monday night. But I think it was like an example of their top-end talent, their depth, their ability to sit down and guard. I think they had a 108 defensive rating in that game, or thereabouts. That's a really impressive number for this Hawks team, which has showed glimpses of being a high-level defensive team, but hasn't really been able to string good defensive games together. I think this is like, it was the most like complete game from the Illawarra Hawks against high-level competition, and it was the game where I came away thinking, oh, they can win it. Like obviously, the parity in this league has been funky, and it's like, damn, anyone could win it. This was the first game where it's like, oh, they may well be the front runners.
No, well, welcome to the party, mate. I told you that in the first week of October. So
okay,
I'm glad
they had one high-scoring game, but you jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah, but the thing that I pointed to in that game was I thought they had an ability to ramp up defensively, and again, they aren't the most consistent team game to game. But you do see in the big games, I think they're highly trustworthy. I think this is a team that shows up and can play defense, and they've got a number of guys that are great athletes on that end. And similar to what I said about the Phoenix, this team just almost never, like the percentage of bad shots this team takes is almost zero. And that's a team that has Tyler Harvey on the floor. That is a team that Sam Froling at times in the past has forced the issue a little bit. They got a whole bunch of guys that in the past have taken bad shots, and they're just not doing it on this team. And the depth part of this is really key, and it might be obvious, but Trey Kell picks up early foul trouble in this game, and he just goes off. And this was the big thing. You're talking about a team that's been in second or first all season long in Melbourne. And as soon as you saw the second units came in, you were just like, wow, this does not look like a fair fight. And even for Melbourne, as we've discussed, they've had problems with Rob Lowe and Marcus Lee and foul trouble. And I think teams are cotton onto it now, because we saw straight away in this game, Froling was going at Rob Lowe, then Olbrich would come in and he'd go at the big fellas, and they're just trying to get him in foul trouble because they believe that I believe they think there is a weakness there in the big man department, because then all of a sudden you're leaning on Jack White playing the 5, and he is undersized against a guy like Froling, or Kyle Bowen. And I got to tell you, Bowen might have a nice future. He's been a good piece for this team. But in the minutes where he was matched up with Peatling looked like Prime Shaq. Like, the difference between those two guys was just so stark. Peatling has become a highly impactful player for this team. So I don't know. I mean, obviously I would pick Illawarra in a series against these two teams. But yeah, I just thought that Illawarra felt like a team that they could outmuscle this Melbourne team, and they could pick them apart in various areas on the floor. And the other part of this is for Illy and Daly, two guys that are elite defenders in the perimeter, they really didn't have any resistance on the perimeter for Harvey and Trey Kell. Harvey was able to get downhill and either go to that crazy bank shot that he's got, that runner that he seems to make every single time. And Kell was just able to walk into the mid-range every single time. There was no resistance, and it was too easy.
Yeah, Dean Vickerman spoke after the game about how we going to guard these Tyler Harvey on balls or handoffs. Like, do you give him space to shoot the 3? Like, do you just throw up a late contest? Do you let him get sort of 2 feet near the paint, and do you just like stay on his hip and you sort of allow the shot to go up? But I think if he sees an opening, I think he's making that floater. Like the analytics will probably tell you to allow the guy to shoot the floater. Yeah. I don't know if that's the case against Tyler Harvey.
Yeah.
So that United is consistently in that drops coverage, and I think Illawarra just has 2 guys who can absolutely exploit that. So it's very tough for them. It's interesting you speak about the shot quality of the Illawarra Hawks. It always seems like they get a good shot. Seems like they're operating, or everyone's operating on the same page. It's interesting because their team of very loose sort of characters, led by a coach in Justin Tatum, who isn't some crazy like disciplinarian. But he still manages to keep them on the same page. He keeps them in line. No one's like veering too far away. But they get like the requisite amount of freedom too. So like Tyler Harvey gets the freedom to rock out. So does Trey Kell. But they're brought in line real quickly. Same with Dave O'Hickey. Dave O'Hickey is someone who can very easily get out of his cylinder and sort of go haywire, but then he's very quickly brought back in. And I think you give credit to a Tyler Harvey as one of the leaders of this team, and a Mason Peatling, and even like a Wani Swaka. These guys who are, I point to Peatling and Swaka in particular, because these are guys who are doing the nitty-gritty stuff. They're the connectors on both ends. They're the guys who are doing all the dirty work so you can be talented. And I think there's like an appreciation from those guys to Peatling and Swaka that, all right, if you're going to do that for me, then I'm going to be solid for you. And I think that's really interesting. And the cool thing was, I was told, so I've been in Wollongong. They played on Saturday against Melbourne United, blew them out, and then they were given a day off. They'll give an optional shooting, but a lot of teams will go in and do like a walkthrough. They'll do another shoot around in between, something like that. They might get a practice in too. Justin Tatum did nothing. It was, all right, day off. And it was interesting because it felt like a test. It felt like, all right, I'm giving you the day off. We have a week in Brisbane Bullets tomorrow. Are you going to reward me for giving you this day off, or are you going to take it for granted? And credit to them, they came out and they blew the Bullets out of the water, blew them out by 30, 40 points. And I think that speaks to the maturity of this team, where this team is now compared to like the middle of last season or the start of last season. I think they've just grown to a point where I think they know the expectations, they know how good they are, and they know that while there is some looseness to the way they play, and I think it's just it's fun the way they play. They know when they have to lock in and zone in and be a very solid team. And again, it's why I think they're a legitimate contender, potentially the favorite to win it.
Yeah, Tatum, almost as much as anyone in this league, feels, and we've had the benefit, you've been around the team a little bit. We worked with him a lot last year during the postseason, so we got to talk to him a lot. And he is like a player's coach. Like, if you want to say what is a player's coach, it feels like Justin Tatum is like the absolute definition of that. It's funny you mentioned Davo Hickey. Just quickly, one last note on the Hawks. It was funny because if I said there was a guy that actually did take bad shots on the Hawks, it would be Hickey from time to time. He just kind of like launches a three that out of nowhere that you're just like, what are you doing, man? Like, you don't need to. He can knock it down, but it's just a little bit out of sync with what the offense does. But
even his post ups, he might have 3 post ups a game because he sees a mismatch. None of that is drawn up. That is Davo Hickey freelancing.
Yeah, he does, but I think he does so much else for this team that everyone probably understands, hey, we got to reward this guy because he's doing all the dirty work for us. One thing that he does, and one note that I made, is so many times he will go all out from the perimeter to crash the offensive glass and give this team second opportunities. And it is so unique because, particularly in this league where the pace of play is so high, you don't necessarily want your guards crashing the offensive glass and then you're playing 5-on-4 basketball or leak outs for easy transition baskets. But he seems to have the license to do it. And he's got such a great sense for the ball. And he's completely reckless. Like, he will put his body on the line to go get that ball and get the tap back and give this Hawks offense another chance where normally they're going to make you pay. And it's almost impossible to stop. Like, guards aren't ready for that. They're not ready to block out a guy in the perimeter. It's so impactful. It's just such a little thing, but I just made a note of it because he did it another 2 or 3 times. And he doesn't always get the ball, but I think it's a really handy tool for this team. And it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch. He's a cool player to watch.
Yeah, like him, and he's good to highlight. And Lockie Ulbrich. Is Lockie Ulbrich the best backup big in the league? Like, his ability to come on the floor, and they don't lose that much. And especially over the past, I want to say like 6 to 7 weeks, like, he's the kind of guy who's like realizing how big he is and how athletic he is in this league and how talented he is. And I think he's leaning into all of those things that make him a point of difference in the NBL. Like, he has been really incredible. Him as a roller, he's maybe the fastest roller I've seen come through the league in a little bit. Just the way he's able to sort of like set the pick and then just launch to the rim. Like, all that stuff is really helpful. He's got the weirdest game I've ever seen. There's a bit of like Alperen Şengün to it in like the floppiness of it. Not that he flops, but that he's just like, he's very like malleable as like a human being. It's very weird. Like, he looks like a floppy human. But I think there's like substantial talent there. And I speak to NBA guys about it, and it's like, no one knows what he is. Like, who does he guard in the NBA? Like, who does he? Like, what is he? I think deep down, everyone just knows he's a really talented basketball player, and he can impact winning. And the way he's impacting winning is really, really impressive. Like, he is, and like I don't have the numbers in front of me what Sam Frolling's minutes are, but the ability to give Sam Frolling a ton of rest because you have a really solid big who you can back him up with. That's so helpful for this team. And you look around the league, there aren't many good local bigs coming off the bench. Ulbrich he probably is the standout. I don't know if I'm missing one. I don't know if I'm counting like a Sam Menenga as a backup big. I don't know if I'm not counting these guys as backup bigs. I'm thinking the backup local bigs right now. And to a point where next season, is Lockie Ulbrich a starter? Like, I don't know. But right now, I think he's been really, really effective.
Yes, more praise for the Hawks as we've given them right throughout the season. All right, we're going long here, so we're going to wrap this up. I've just got 4 quick notes, no real discussion, just notes of things that I noted down from the weekend. So first, stick with the Hawks fans. I thought the flop count, I know people would like to get outraged by things these days, but I thought the flop count was cool. You want to have a home court advantage. You want to get in the guy's head if you can. I don't care if you got offended by it. It's funny, it's simple, it's whatever. I don't have a problem with that.
So the gamesmanship, I appreciate. The hypocrisy of it, I don't. There were more flops by Hawks players in that game than Chris Golding, respectfully.
But
the gamesmanship, it is what it is. And as long as when Chris Golding retires, as long as there is the requisite respect shown to him, awesome, do your thing.
Of course. Yes. Yeah. That's not anything big picture about CG. We love him. They might not, but hopefully everyone appreciates him at the end. You're right. Perth Wildcats. I don't know how much WWF or WWE you've watched over your journey, but they play the Kurt Angle music in the background. So I'm thinking, the crowd can get into a "You suck" chant. So it's just a piece of advice for the Red Army. You suck. You're supposed to add the "You suck" when the Kurt Angle music plays. So food for thought for 36ers fans down the stretch. So I had that noted down. The Sydney Kings had a new starting lineup. Olgs, I don't know if you noticed that. They brought Cam Oliver back in, and he looked great. And he looked great. So maybe this is the Cam Oliver turnaround, 17 rebounds, whatever he had. He had big numbers. That was cool to see. The Kings obviously took care of Tassie there. And the last note is, we spoke about Adelaide a lot. It's probably the first podcast we haven't had a detailed conversation. Probably the one missing piece, and it's hard when you got two guys averaging 20-plus points. But I just thought since DJ came back from the hamstring, he was just a guy out there. And when he was getting shots, they felt like frustration shots. Like he's like, I better get one up because I don't know when I'm going to touch the ball again. Getting him 21 three-point attempts. Yes, it was against Cairns, but I think a confident DJ Vasiljevic, again, just makes everyone else nervous. I liked it. Get him the ball.
Yeah, DJ is too good to be a bystander. And that's what he's looked like for way too long during the season since he came back from that injury. I get it. This team is built around Kendrick Davis being high usage. I don't think you're going to win games consistently like that. Kendrick Davis, and he did a good job of this against Cairns. You got to be able to get everyone else involved within the flow of an offense, not just as like a hot potato thrown to him. I thought they did a good job of finding DJ when he got hot. I think they could do that with everyone on that team.
Absolutely. Especially DJ. I liked it. He's a star in this league. And as I said, like to see him get involved. I think he's one of their good distributors and gets, particularly Isaac Humphries going a little bit there as well, if he's on the floor. So the 36ers will continue to watch with interest. It's going to be fascinating. Like I said, if you're listening to this before Wednesday night, make sure you watch on ESPN. It's going to be a great doubleheader. Make sure you tune in with me, Olgun, Ryan Brockhoff, Andrew Bogut's back on the show this Thursday night. Nothing but net Aussie hoops, plenty to talk about there. Bogut had some interesting stuff that he picked up from the weekend. I got to pick his mind about that. Also in the FIBA Hall of Fame since we last caught up with him as well, which is pretty damn cool. So we're going to chat about all that. That's Thursday night on ESPN. Olgs, espn.com.au for all your finest. You're going to break some big ones this week or what?
Maybe. I'm in the gong now heading to Canberra for the National Performance Camp. You want me to talk about some of the best prospects in Australia?
Yeah, definitely next week. We'll get to that next week. This has been a long podcast and you're on your phone. So the 5-star resorts you normally stay at in the gong, just the Wi-Fi potentially needs an upgrade.
And at the beautiful Sage Hotel. Yeah. And everything else is great, but their Wi-Fi, not up to it. So get on that.
All right. Yeah, you'll have to let them know. All right, that's going to do it for today. Kane and Olgun, we appreciate you joining us on YouTube or the podcast platform, wherever it is. We'll speak to you next week.